He resisted a lot of new music. He had ideas about who the best musicians were, not based on whether they were popular, but whether they had certain qualities that he thought were better musically, which is also coming from somebody hard of hearing, and so he had a peculiar way of hearing. So, you know, the fact that he would think that that would somehow give him a better sense of the pure sound than somebody with full hearing. But that goes to that stubbornness that I think that was captured very well, that sort of stubborn, I am right sort of approach that Edison had to everything. So Edison was actually his own A&R person. He picked the artists, he picked the music, which was bad for the company. He had people who had Edison machines thought they were wonderful. They were better than the Victor machines, the other competitors. The problem was they complained that they never got the most recent music and they weren't getting their favorite artists, right? Jobs understood that, right? Jobs understood consumer culture and the consumer economy. So in that way, they were very different. But in other ways, they were, I think, a lot alike. They were both driven and they were both always, they knew they were right. And I think actually one of the things that enables people like that to succeed and change the world is they're not operating by committee. They have a vision, right? And it's that vision that these individuals have that then becomes the driving force behind the whole organization. And I think that's very much the case with both Edison and with Jobs. And when they were working on projects that put them in a position where they could leapfrog ahead of where everybody else had been, they were really good at it. But at the same time, you know, so the Mac never, as wonderful a machine as that is, it has a small segment of the PC market, and it always did, right? Because Jobs wanted to control the whole thing, right? Whereas the more open system that became the Microsoft Windows PCs was a more open system. And there are advantages to each, but one becomes a much less expensive, more adaptable and malleable system than the other does. The iPhone is now being challenged by Android, in part for the same reason. Right? The iPod, on the other hand, has continued to be sort of the standard for portable music devices. So there are ways in which that's kind of similar between them. They're also both very good at learning from failure. The Mac drew a lot, the operating system, drew a lot on a failed computer that that Jobs developed after he left. The first time when he left Apple, he went on to develop what was called the Next computer. It had a really terrific operating system. It was a failure as a commercial venture. But when he returned to Apple, he brought that back in and used a lot of what they had developed in developing the operating system for the Mac. Edison's ore milling venture was a failure. Right? Later on in the 1950s, in fact, somebody took up that same system and figured out how to get it to a commercial state for the low-grade ore that remained in the Mesabi range that had driven Edison out of business. But what Edison was selling was not ore, but sand. He was selling sand to cement manufacturers, which intrigued him. That there was this market for the sand, so he began to, because Edison had developed the best rock crushing technology in the world, right? Ended up licensing it to a bunch of other mines as well. Edison realized that he had really good technology to be used in this other area. And so what he did was he began to investigate the cement industry and figured out how to improve the manufacturing process. He developed what was known as the long rotary kiln, which greatly improved the efficiency of the cement manufacturing process. But he did that in large part because he figured out how to take some of the technology he had developed for that failed venture and adapt it to something else. And that's the same thing that Jobs had done. He adapted a failure into a more successful venture.